opening the panel for questions. If someone wants to ask, you can just turn in, whoever wants to ask something.
Andrea, you have Andrea there.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
okay.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for organizing this fantastic and important conference. So our aim is, as far as I know, is to think about the challenges and the opportunities as far as education is concerned. So we are not here to think about very important other issues, but how to transform this material to education. And in order to do that, we have to understand two types of challenges. One type of challenges which is coming from the education and the transformation of education globally and in the different national context. And the other challenges is related to the topic itself, namely remembering women in the Holocaust. And I would invite us, maybe if we have got this generous time because of technical difficulties, to turn it into our friend, this technical difficulty. And maybe I would ask Naam and Tal to reflect on this. So and maybe make a list, because this kind of list might be very useful later on when the other presenters are also presenting, that what are the challenges that you are facing as far as the educational structure is concerned, or the educational infrastructure, or the educational politics is concerned, and the other one which is coming from the field in itself. And in the introduction, we already Carol already mentioned several challenges. So I was wondering if you can, contribute to this, and then later on we can add to the challenges, and hopefully by the end of this two-day conference, we might also have some suggestions how to overcome those challenges. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Now, I suggest you start.
Wait, may I ask a question before you start, please? And that question is, how do we, to just piggyback, so to speak, on what Andrea had to say, how do we deal with the fact that so many survivors, of course, have already passed away? So how do we tell their stories? And so perhaps in addressing some of these issues that Andrea raised, the two of you might have something to say about that as well. Thank you.
Tali, should I? Okay, thank you. And so thank you, Andrea and Carol. Of course, I would actually start with Carol, because when I'm thinking, it's a question. Of course, it's a huge question, which goes with, unfortunately, with more challenges. I will begin from the basic challenge, which sometimes is unknown, but it goes with the first. Sorry for the barracks. I was about to say it earlier, but first we have to always to remember, and it's unfortunately it's not going to change, that approximately 15 to 18% of Holocaust survivors gave testimony at all. So first, when we are talking about an event with no witness, okay, because and even before, so first we have to understand that 85% of Holocaust survivors, unless we're gonna discover something new, which we're not, I guess, unfortunately, did not give testimony, which is, to my perspective at least, a huge subject for research, but a difficult research, because you have, but it's a research. So, and then we're going to the 15% who gave testimony. I will say another challenge, which is if I will speak Hebrew, I will say mevaes, which is we have three big, let's call it a collections of testimonies. Okay, so the big ones will be in Yad Vashem, will be the Shoah Foundation, and will be Yad Vashem or Shoah Foundation, we have Portonof, even though it's not there. But so even though I'm coming from Yad Vashem and that's my place, for example, we have there in our testimony collections, we have problems, concerns, the interviewers, okay? The people who took interviews from the survivor themselves. So, I mean, even before we are asking ourselves, even before we are asking ourselves a question about gender or gender blindness, for example, we have, I will give you one extreme example, okay? It's extreme, but I will give you also in the sense of, of course, we have the basic thing about these testimonial collections that they were taken do accept Portonof, which is Portonof. It's in Yale. It's an amazing testimony collection. It was established by Dory Laub and by Jeffrey Hartman, and they were actually taking the testimonies or listening to the testimony in a way as a therapy, like a zerem todah, like a self-consciousness, okay? The survivors were telling the story without interruption. What I'm talking interruption is that in the other two huge collection, which is Yad Vashem and what is known in the public like Spielberg collection, which is the Shoah Foundation, you have the narrative, okay? You have like life before the Holocaust, life during the Holocaust, and life after the Holocaust. Many times, that will be a disruption. I'm going back to my, it is extreme example, okay? But there is a woman, she's an Auschwitz survivor, her name, she died, it was Esther Goldstein. She also recognized herself in Auschwitz album, and this is why she was also summoned to give testimony in Eichmann trial. But in what happened to her, she is entering the camp with three of her sisters. One of her sister in the selection, there is a very difficult description how this is 1944, okay? So the Germans are doing this ideological, from their ideological they entering the camp more women who have small children, they taking the small children. Tali was just talking about motherhood by force. And this is what they're doing to Piri, her sister. They're coming from Hungary. And in her testimony, she described this very, very difficult argue with Piri, her sister, and the SS doctor, who is actually telling her the truth for this, that if you want to live, give your children to your grandmother. She is saying no, and he's saying yes, and she is saying no, and they are arguing, not talking about this. And this is a very, very difficult. She have, of course, she have a baby and she have a 5-year-old son. And eventually the SS is taking away the children by force, giving them to her mother and forcing her into Auschwitz, into Birkenau. What she's trying to do from them is to commit suicide. And Esther is telling how she and the other sister are trying to avoid her to commit suicide. But when Esther is telling this part of her testimony, the interview here, a woman in our institution asked her, and this is extreme, okay, but she stops her and she asks, so you're saying that the SS doctor was a good man? So Esther is, of course, reacting like all of us, and it's in video, so you can see that she's shocked and puzzled, okay, and she's keeping quiet, and she said, what? And the interviewer is explaining herself. She's saying, well, he tried to save you. He was telling you what is going on in the camp. He was trying to save you. So that will be, okay. And of course, we have all these other, of course, not extreme like that, thing when someone is, a survivor is talking about an experience in Auschwitz or in other place, but the interviewer is saying, no, 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 no. We are still in Jewish life before the Holocaust. I want you to tell us if you had anti-Semitism. Hi, Lily.
Hi, Lily.
Hi, I'm back.
Good. So we also have, okay, this challenge of testimonies. Then we have the gender blind thing, and thinking about it a lot. And I'm only putting challenges, not solutions, Carol. For example, when we're talking, or not example, we're talking about the fact that most of Holocaust survivors are not with us anymore, the one who gave testimony and are now, and so when we are talking about gender, for example, as a blind spot, it means that it was, in many cases, of course, a blind spot of the people who took the testimony, right? So when Boder, or even in the early testimonies, are asking questions, right? They are not asking what I can say generally gender question, right? And sometimes when we think about the void of these subjects from the testimony, we may think, or we may keep in mind that maybe the void is not because survivors, female from our perspective, don't want to talk about the subject. It's maybe because they're not being asked about the subject because it doesn't consider to be a subject at all, and thus this is lost. And talking about so the question was, sorry, and about education, about challenges. So Carol, I think that we have to go back deeply to testimonies. There are so many testimonies that have not been examined yet. It seems to us to be like surprising, but not. We have so much basic material, raw material, initial materials, like testimonies, like diaries that we're reading in the time, in sub camps, in small camps, in places that were not checked yet. And this is something that we have to, I think, we have to do. And from educational point of view, and the subject of women in the Holocaust, first, I think, unfortunately, at least in Israel, it's not yet, maybe with more a subject or a legitimate subject. Sometimes it's still kind of, but it's not a subject. I mean, the women in the Holocaust, or so even this is still a challenge. But I want to finish because I'm talking too much. But what Tali was saying about Ruth, that when Ruth was talking about the subject of women in the Holocaust, and that goes to Andrea question about education and about challenges. So first, it should be a subject, but more of a subject. But second, when Ruth was referring or actually implying to the fact that this is a subject which is difficult to talk about, right? Because when we talk about subjects in the Holocaust that are not spoken a lot, so one of them, of course, will be humiliation, right? Humiliation is one of, as we know it, difficult experience to go through as a human being, of course, what it does to the self, humiliation and shame, right? And of course, then to talk about it. And I think when we are talking about subject of gender, many of them will go to, as what was kind of saying, to difficult subject, like ceasing having your period, okay? It's difficult even when we're trying to talk about it in class, right? It can be even embarrassing, right? For some of it depends on the age of the students. And it's difficult and it's humiliating. How do you deal if you're not stopping having pregnancies? And these are, and also I know it sounds, I'm not comparing suffer by no means, but okay, but I will say, and these are difficult subjects. Losing children, okay? There is argument, I know, between us scholars if there's subject that survivors were actually omitting or omitting to talk about it. I think it will be, at least to my research, that will be losing children. It's quite difficult to find testimonies saying, I lost my child, or my child was murdered. I find from Auschwitz, for example, handful of them. And it's not that there were no mothers who lost their children in Auschwitz, because this subject is, as Ruth was saying, of course, so difficult. And it also bears, unfortunately, a punks of guilt, which kind of escort, I can say, people in a way for many lives. So that's it. Thank you. Sorry, talking thanks.
I will not add much after Naama's wonderful points. I will just say, first of all, concerning my mother, she herself did not admit it. She could not talk about the horrific things she personally went through. It was hard for her to testify. She gave testimony to Yad Vashem and of course, and Spielberg. But in her books, she admitted it's too hard for her to write about it. And if I quote, one of her quotes about writing about the Holocaust was that she has to write it in a very dry, minimal way. And I write, and then I get to the, to the pit. To the pit, remembering Anichka and Peter and the other children she took care of. And there I stop. I can't do the next step. But now, putting that aside, I think that regarding at least what I see in Beit Terezin, where I'm a part of the board, art is a very good way of connecting the younger generation to testimonies and to stories. For instance, if it's about dilemmas, to hear or listen or see an exhibition and then talk about the dilemmas and maybe take it to the next step. Third generation artists are doing artworks inspired by Theresienstadt survivors. They get the testimonies, they don't know the survivors, and they do statues or plastic drawings or dances or anything in the field of art. So that would be another way to, and they do hear the testimonies or get them written. That was one example. I myself guide or train second generation peers to tell their stories of their parents and their family, because I've been doing it for so many years. So this is another thing that is quite popular now in Israel.
Thank you very much, Tal. And
That's an idea I left out.
Thank you very much again, Tal. We have some technical problems with the other participants who were supposed to be in this panel. So I'm checking again if Emma Abbott is here with us. Probably not. And Professor Michelle Kelso. Okay, so if they are not with us, we had the two lectures of Naama and Tal, and now I'm to say that as more as I read about your mother, I admire her a lot, and now I admire her as a mother as well. I think this is an unusual way of raising a child after the Holocaust. We know the problems that the second generations usually complain about and take on his shoulders, and it seems like you had a better way of being raised up, and this is
quite
great.
Almost normal, except the things that were under the surface, but on that we have no control.
Yeah. But you are devoted to her and to her story, and this is really an amazing thing.
Something I didn't say at last, that I am the daughter of my mother, and hopefully soon I'm a grandmother, and I'm still finding the need to share my mother's Holocaust experiences and insights. And I think maybe for others who I think maybe don't know enough, but maybe for myself, attempting to understand my mother and myself better. So